I'm really looking forward to this short session on betting on esports in Germany. And in Germany, Germany is the second biggest gambling market in the EU. We're talking about 20 billion US dollar of revenue in 2021, and there are three major topics in Germany that are being discussed right now. First of all, and this will be the focus of our lecture, gambling permit for betting providers. We will see that we have a new law in Germany, and it does not explicitly mention esports, but the legislative documents regarding the respective law, they do. More of that in a minute. The second big thing is betting taxes. Pretty German thing. Without spoiling whether you can get a permit as a betting provider in Germany, you need to pay taxes regarding sports and esports. So we actually got a law here that explicitly mentions esports and esports betting. The third topic is betting fraud. We have no explicit regulation on fraud in the esports sector, but we do have a specific norm regarding sports. So this is actually quite a big discussion in Germany right now, whether this sports betting fraud law is also applicable regarding esports events. But to be honest with you, we of course have in Germany criminal sanction regarding fraud anyway, so it's not really a big part. It's not really that interesting of a discussion. So we'll focus on gambling permits for betting providers in Germany in this session. First of all, our reference point, of course, is betting on esports, not esports itself, because esports is not gambling. Esports, as well as traditional sports, of course, is a competition, and sometimes the precise delimitation can be really difficult. According to established case law in Germany, what matters is that in gambling, and now I need to quote that, the decision on winning and losing according to the conditions of the game does not depend essentially on the skill, knowledge, and attention of the players, but slowly or mainly on chance. So whenever we cross that line, we of course have gambling and not esports or sports. But as I already said, our reference point today will be betting on esports, not the esports title itself. When we talk about gambling in Germany, we need to know that you only can operate as a gambling provider in Germany when you have a concession, a permit of some sorts. And we actually have a new law in Germany as of July 1st, the so-called New State Treaty on Gambling in Germany. I will get to that in a second. And of course, the big question is, can gambling providers get a concession for betting on esports events? First of all, regarding the new law, the Glücksspielstaatsvertrag 2021, pretty German thing as well, is a treaty between all 16 German states that creates a uniform federal framework for the organization of gambling. Before that, we had a quite fragmented system, but now we're unified in Germany regarding all things organized gambling. The responsible authority is the Darmstadt Regional Council in the German state of Hesse. And of course, they're more like the executive arm of the gambling committee in Germany. Is German law even relevant? Of course, the e-commerce directive of the EU and the German Telemedia Act explicitly exclude the gambling sector from the application of the country of origin principle, and therefore whenever there's a chance for someone out of Germany to participate in a bet, you have German gambling law. And of course, when we talk about online betting, which is by far the biggest sector, when we talk about esports betting, of course there is the chance to participate in the bet. We've got 5 major objectives in the state treaty. First of all, to prevent the emergence of gambling and betting addiction. Yeah, we know about that. Secondly, to steer the natural gambling instinct into orderly and supervised tracks. And the most important thing is down at the bottom there. It's to counterattack the development and spread of unauthorized gambling in black markets. So this will be one of the most important discussion points going forward, because of course you know that there is betting on esports. Right now there are some like Sports Radar, one of the biggest data collectors on this planet. I just talked to their head of esports on the weekend, and they were like, yeah, probably the gambling sector, the global gambling sector regarding esports, we're talking about probably $5 billion right now. And some states are heading into a new lockdown, so it probably will only get bigger. So when we come to the conclusion at the end of this session that you cannot get a permit for your gambling activities, then yeah, we'll have a black market problem. To ensure the protection of minors and players, of course, is the third thing, and the integrity of sports, and protect everyone involved from fraudulent schemes. As far as I know, we will share those slides at the end of the session, so whenever you need some details on that, you can come back and look into the slides. So, baseline, online betting is only permitted on sports events in Germany. So the big question is, what is a sports event? That is, and I know a lot of people in the industry cannot hear this question anymore, is esports sports? And we actually have section 21 of the state treaty, which states sports betting may be permitted as combination bets, blah, blah, blah. It's about sports events. So sports betting is betting on sports events. The big question, of course, being, what is a sport event? And a sport event is a sporting competition. So as you can see, most of the times in Germany, we've got this problem. They're defining sports by sports, and we get no further definition what a sports event is, at least explicitly in the law. But the legislative documents, they address the term and even esports. The term sports is not defined in a treaty and is open to interpretation. The reason for this is that the understanding of what constitutes sports is in a state of regular change and may also change during the term of this act. It therefore contains, for example, neither a general prohibition nor an explicit permission for betting on esports. Rather, the authority must examine on a case-by-case basis whether the event to be bet on counts as sport. So what we have here, of course, is a case-by-case decision that must be made by the responsible authority, the Regierungspräsidium Darmstadt. But right now, and this is the big problem, because if you ask me now whether you can get a permit in Germany, the short answer is yes and no. Yes, legally speaking, there of course is the possibility, I'll get to that in a second. But in reality, it's pretty hard. I'll get to that in a second as well. So the big thing, the big argument is from Darmstadt and of course the Gambling Council in the background, as long as the German Olympic Association does not recognize esports as sports, it's not sports. This, of course, is simply wrong, because who defines the term in the law? It's not the German Olympic Association, it's the lawmaker, it's the regulator themselves, and they're just not willing to. But this is not an argument that would hold up in court. I'm 100% sure of that. What are the biggest problems when we try to get esports under sports? Of course, it's pretty diverse when we talk about content, way of playing it, like console versus virtual reality, a huge difference in that. And in the system, each publisher has their own strategy, of course, working with a tournament organizer like a third party or doing everything themselves. So it's not easy to answer the question, is esports sports? Not even in the context of German gambling law. I'm sorry. So the four biggest arguments against this subsumption are physical component of sports. As I already told you, there are different opinions on that, and every concept of sports is somehow based on human activity, which must be physical to a certain degree. But the big question is, to what degree? We will not have a problem when we talk about XR, virtual reality, augmented reality, and everything around this. It's getting more complicated when we talk about high requirements for micromanagement. So I would not say that esports per se is not physical enough, and as we already seen, the concept of sports evolves day by day. When we talk about ethical components, well, let me just click on this as well. This is just a really rough way of putting things, like comparing League of Legends and boxing. But League of Legends, of course, has the depiction of violence to a small degree, and big boxing has real violence. So it's not like sports and violence, or the depiction of violence, are separate things. The gambling aspect, or the influence of chance, we already discussed. The big point at the end of the day will be the publisher. But when we talk about gambling, gambling is not allowed if you haven't come of age, if you're a minor still. So, of course, we're talking about gambling in the bigger areas where the money is. And the German Football League, for example, has, of course, the same rights Riot Games has regarding the League of Legends European Championship. So, at least in the context of gambling, this probably isn't really a good argument as well. I'm watching the time, so hopefully I did quite the landing time-wise. Summary, can gambling providers get a concession for betting on esports events? Yes and no. They should be able to when we talk about the right esports title. Virtual reality, no problem, probably. But it depends. If you have a hyper-realistic shooter with a virtual reality headset and like peripherals that looks like a gun with a trigger, okay, ethical problems as well. But all in all, virtual reality will be more easy to get under the term of sports than, for example, Hearthstone, an online card game. From a purely legal standpoint, it is possible, but the responsible authority refuses to grant permission so far. Consequence, well, if you are a gambling provider, you should get a good lawyer that knows about this topic, and yeah, I think your chances of winning are pretty good.